She wrote a children's book about grief. She sold it to grieving families. She went on television and talked about the pain of losing a husband, of raising 3 boys alone, of finding a way to carry the people you love, even after they are gone. The book was called Are You With Me? And a jury in Utah just decided that she was the reason her children needed it, that she was the one who caused the grief she wrote about, that the man whose death inspired every single page of that book did not die of an aneurysm, did not die of an accident, did not die of a mystery, but died because his wife put 5 times the lethal amount of fentanyl into his celebratory drink while texting her secret boyfriend from the same house in the same hours that he lay dying in their bed. This is the story of Kouri Richins. And it is one of the darkest cases of deliberate cruelty, dressed as love, that the American justice system has seen in years. March 4th, 2022, 3:21 in the morning. A small mountain town called Kamas, Utah, 40 miles southeast of Salt Lake City, where the roads are quiet and the sky goes dark enough at night to show every star. Inside a bedroom of a house on a hill, a woman picks up her phone and dials 911. Her voice, when it finally comes, is broken and desperate. She tells the dispatcher that her husband is cold, that he is not breathing, that she does not know what has happened. Later, in a courtroom, her defense attorney would play that recording for the jury and say, simply, "Those were the sounds of a wife becoming a widow." The jury would hear something else entirely. His name was Eric Richins. He was 39 years old, the father of 3 young boys, and the owner of a stone masonry business he had built from nothing in the mountains of Utah. By every account of those who knew him, Eric Richins was a man who showed up for his kids, for the families whose homes he built with his hands, for the soccer team he coached on weekends, the one whose players still break the huddle to this day by calling his name out loud. He did not use drugs. He had no history of substance abuse. He had no reason to have fentanyl anywhere in his body. And yet when the medical examiner completed the autopsy on the morning of March 4th, 2022, the finding was unambiguous. Eric Richins had died with 5 times the lethal dosage of fentanyl in his blood. Not a trace amount, not an accidental residue. 5 times the amount required to kill a healthy grown man. The chief prosecutor, who would later stand before a jury and lay out every fact of this case, put it plainly. That extraordinary amount was not accidental, it was intentional. Kouri Richins, the prosecution said, wanted Eric not only dead, she wanted him good and dead. The woman who made that 911 call was his wife, Kouri Richins, 35 years old, a real estate agent who ran her own company and who had spent their married life building what looked from the outside like a portrait of suburban mountain perfection. 3 beautiful boys, a successful husband, a home in the mountains of Kama, a business of her own. Friends who later told the court that the couple seemed happy together, that in the weeks before Eric died, they seemed to those who knew them like the happiest they had ever been. What those friends did not know, what almost no one outside a very narrow circle of people knew, was that behind that image, the entire architecture of Kouri Richins' life was quietly collapsing. She was in debt, significantly, desperately. Eric's estate, including his masonry business and their properties, was valued at approximately $4 million. And there was someone else. A man prosecutors would refer to throughout the trial only as her paramour. A secret boyfriend whose identity was protected in the court filings but whose presence ran beneath every moment of this story like a current. The night Eric Richins took his last breath, that man sent Kouri a photograph of 2 people kissing, captioned with the words, "Love you." She wrote back from the same house where her husband lay dying in their bed, "Love you too." To understand what happened on that March morning, you have to go back further, because what prosecutors proved at trial was not an act of passion or a moment of desperation. It was a plan with a beginning, a middle, a near miss, a second attempt, and a completion. And the beginning was paperwork. In January of 2022, Kouri Richins took out a new life insurance policy on her husband, naming herself the sole beneficiary. She forged his signature on the application. That policy went into effect on February 4th, 2022. 10 days later was Valentine's Day. February 14th, 2022, Valentine's Day. Kouri Richins purchased a sandwich from a local diner called The Diner and left it on the seat of Eric's truck. According to testimony presented at trial, Eric ate the sandwich and within hours called two of his closest friends to tell them he felt like he was going to die. He suffered a severe physical reaction. Hives broke out across his body. He lost consciousness. The people around him were frightened. He survived. He did not know at the time what had been in the sandwich. But what prosecutors would later reveal was that someone close to Eric Richins had known for some time that something was wrong, that Eric had been afraid, that he had told the people he trusted most. If anything ever happens to me, look at my wife. He stayed in the marriage, people who knew him said, because of his boys. He could not bring himself to leave his boys, and so he stayed. 17 days later, Kouri tried again. March 3rd, 2022. The night before, Eric Richins died. Kouri had closed a deal for her real estate business, and the couple marked the occasion the way couples do, with a drink at home to celebrate. According to prosecutors, Kouri prepared the drinks herself. She brought them upstairs to the bedroom. They toasted. They went to sleep. Sometime during the night, Kouri got up and went to sleep in the room of one of their sons. At 3:21 in the morning, she returned to the master bedroom, found her husband cold and unresponsive in their bed, and called 911. The medical examiner later determined that the Moscow mule she had prepared for Eric that night had been laced with illicit fentanyl, street fentanyl, not a prescription, not something found in any medicine cabinet in that home, combined with a sedative antipsychotic medication called quetiapine that had been prescribed to Kouri herself. 5 times the lethal amount. The combination, the prosecution argued, was not chosen carelessly. It was chosen to make absolutely certain the job was done. Where did the fentanyl come from? That question was answered by the prosecution's star witness, a woman named Carmen Lauber, who worked as a housekeeper and who testified that she had sold illicit fentanyl pills to Kouri Richins on multiple occasions in the weeks before Eric's death. Lauber's testimony was central to the state's case and was contested fiercely by the defense. Her account had shifted across multiple statements, and defense attorneys pointed to those inconsistencies repeatedly during cross-examination. But the jury listened to all 40 witnesses. They heard 13 days of testimony, and they deliberated for 3 hours before returning a verdict that was unanimous on every single count. In the months after Eric Richins died, Kouri Richins collected approximately $1.3 million in life insurance payments. By September of 2022, within 6 months of her husband's death, most of that money was gone, spent. Much of it had gone toward paying down the debts that had been strangling her. The prosecution's forensic accountant walked the jury through every transfer, every payment, every figure. She had forged Eric's signature, not just on the insurance application, but on multiple financial documents. She had been quietly dismantling his estate from within the marriage for months before he died. And then came the book. Sometime in the year that followed Eric's death, Kouri Richins wrote a children's picture book. She called it, "Are You With Me?" She said publicly, in television interviews, that she had been inspired by her own grief, by the need to help her 3 young sons understand what it meant to lose their father suddenly, to help them feel his presence even in his absence. The book was about how we carry the people we love with us even after they are gone. She appeared on local television to discuss it, speaking with warmth and visible emotion about what it had cost her to write those pages and how much she wanted her boys to find a way to heal. The book was published. People bought it. Grieving families bought it. And at the same time, quietly, in another part of Utah, Eric Richins' family was asking questions no one was giving them adequate answers to. They hired a private investigator. They pushed. They refused to stop. And eventually the investigation that followed led to an arrest that Kouri Richins never saw coming. Or at least, never showed that she had. On May 8, 2023, Kouri Richins was arrested and charged with the murder of her husband. She pleaded not guilty. She maintained her innocence through nearly 3 years of pre-trial hearings, delays, and public attention. When the trial finally opened in February of 2026 in Summit County, Utah, it was in front of a packed courtroom and a national audience. The chief prosecutor, Brad Bloodworth, stood before the jury on the first day and told them what the evidence would prove: that Kouri Richins murdered Eric for his money and to get a fresh start at life. That more than anything, she wanted his money to perpetuate her facade of privilege, affluence, and success, and that she was willing to try twice to make sure that happened. The defense told a different story. They said the evidence was circumstantial, that the investigation had been sloppy and biased, that Kouri Richins was a woman navigating life as a single grieving mother who was being wrongly blamed for the death of a man who may have had his own access to the substances that killed him. 40 witnesses took the stand over 13 days. The forensic accountant laid out the debt and the insurance fraud and the forged signatures in precise financial detail. The housekeeper described selling the pills. Friends of Eric testified about the Valentine's Day sandwich and the reaction that followed. And then there was the note. Investigators had found a handwritten note inside a kitchen cabinet in the Richins' home, and the prosecution told the jury that note chronicled exactly how Eric Richins had been killed. The prosecutor pointed to specific words inside it, including 2 that would not leave the courtroom easily: drink in bed. The defense arrested without calling a single witness, and the jury went to deliberate. On March 16, 2026, the verdict was delivered out loud in that courtroom in Summit County, Utah. Guilty of aggravated murder. Guilty of attempted aggravated murder for the Valentine's Day poisoning. Guilty of insurance fraud. Guilty of forgery. Guilty on every single count the state had brought. The jury had deliberated for just over 3 hours. 8 people, unanimous, on every charge. When it was read, Kouri Richins showed little reaction. She sat subdued as the words moved through the room. She would later vow to appeal and fight these charges, no matter how long it takes. The sentencing was scheduled for May 13th, 2026, the date that would have been Eric Richins' 44th birthday. In the hours before, Judge Richard Mrazek delivered his ruling. Eric's family came forward with impact statements. The children were not present. Their words were read aloud by therapists because the weight of what they needed to say required someone else to carry it into the room. One of the boys, identified in court documents only as AR, had written, "You took away everything from me and my brothers. I don't want you out of jail because I will not feel safe if you are out." All 3 boys sent variations of the same message. All 3 said the same thing about the woman who had raised them. They were afraid of her. They did not want her free. Judge Mrazek spoke carefully and at length before delivering his ruling. He described what Kouri Richins had been convicted of doing: the first poisoning attempt on Valentine's Day, the 17 days that followed in which she did not reconsider but doubled down, prepared and tried again, and then the completion of the act through the administration of poison into the drink of a man celebrating with her. He chose his words with precision. A person convicted of committing that sequence of acts in that way, and for that reason, and who causes the absolute tragedy that has befallen Eric Richins' sons and family. A person convicted of those things, he said, is simply too dangerous to ever be free. Kouri Richins was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The children's book is still out there, Are You With Me? Written, a jury unanimously decided, by the woman who made her children need it. The grief she described processing was grief she engineered. The loss she turned into pages designed to comfort other families in pain was a loss she planned, attempted twice, and completed. Eric Richins' 3 sons had to have their words read into a courtroom by strangers because they could not bear to be in the same room as their mother. Eric himself, the man who knew something was wrong, who warned his family what to do if anything ever happened to him, who stayed in a house where the danger was real because he did not want to leave his boys, did not die the way his wife told the world he died. He did not die of an aneurysm. He did not die of an accident. He died in a bed where she had brought him a drink to celebrate the life she was already building without him. While texting the man she planned to build it with, his family listened to his warning when it was almost too late. And 4 years later, in a courtroom in Utah, the jury listened too.